On today's show, the NBA draft is a week away. The Cavs don't have a pick in the first round, but they've got two in the second round. Who are some names to know when that time gets here? We're going to talk about a few of those guys. Plus, the Cavs make an assistant coaching hire. We've got an anniversary to talk about. That's all straight ahead on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name's Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube as we get started here, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. The NBA draft is 1 week from yesterday. That is when the first round will take place. Of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers do not have a first-round draft pick. They have two picks in the second round. Their first pick at number 49 overall, their second pick at number 58 overall. If you are interested, their first-round pick is now with the Phoenix Suns. It's the number 29th overall pick by virtue of the Cavs having the second best regular season record in the NBA. That was, of course, traded to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Donovan Mitchell. I think that was worth it. And then the Jazz traded that pick this year to the Phoenix Suns because they saw the writing on the wall and said, hey, the Cavs are pretty good. We don't want this pick. We would rather have a Phoenix pick in the future. We'll give you a Cavs pick right now in exchange for that. So that is why the Cavs are not going to be selecting on next Wednesday unless they make a trade into the first round, which as of right now, and of course you can never say never on these things, but as of right now, that's not something I would anticipate happening. I'm not sure that they're going to make 2 second-round picks, but as of right now, they have 2 second-round picks. And I am not somebody that is a big college basketball guy. I spend most of my nights in the fall, winter, and spring watching NBA games, whether the Cavs are on or not. I'm watching games every single night, so I don't necessarily have a ton of bandwidth for college basketball. That said, I do watch some of the tournament. I know a little bit about these guys, not a ton about these guys, but what I have done for today's episode is sort of go through some of the mock drafts that are out there. And not everybody has complete 2-round mocks. There are a lot of great mock drafts out there. I know the guys over at NBA Big Board do a great job. However, they only have a first-round mock out. So I couldn't necessarily rely upon them. Places like ESPN, The Athletic, Yahoo, and some other places do have two-round mock drafts out. So we're going to go through those. And I wanted to start with ESPN's because their latest mock draft, and they did have a top 100 player rating as well, too. But they had the Cavs making both picks, and I do think one of them is pretty interesting because it's a name that we know. The number 49 overall pick, which, again, the first pick that the Cavs had, ESPN had the Cavs selecting Vladislav Golden, a center from the University of Michigan. He is a Russian center, 7 feet tall, certainly a big body. And I think that there's going to be a little bit of a theme here as we go through this list, because it's not necessarily that you are expecting these guys to be replacements right now, but I do think that with second-round picks and even with first-round picks, I think you're drafting for the future more so than the immediate, and the Cavs are in a spot right now where they are drafting for maybe some future help. I say maybe because second-round picks very, very rarely pan out. The number 58 overall selection, ESPN had the Cavs picking Ryan Nembhard, a point guard out of Gonzaga. Why does that name sound familiar? Because Ryan Nembhard is the younger brother of Andrew Nembhard, who, of course, we all know as a member of the Indiana Pacers. And I'm sure for Cavs fans, he's been in maybe a handful of nightmares that you may have had over the last month or so since the Cavs were eliminated from the playoffs because Andrew had such a fantastic series against the Cavs and maybe hasn't been necessarily quite as good lately in the NBA Finals as he was against the Cavs. But he's somebody that was I believe, a 4-year player at Gonzaga. His brother also went to Gonzaga. I do like when you've got guys. I do like the bloodline aspect of things where you already know that somebody in the family, and this doesn't mean that Ryan's going to pan out, obviously, but I do like that you just kind of know, okay, that family kind of understands it. The family kind of gets it. I do think that is certainly a good sign. Moving on to the Athletic, their latest mock draft had Koby Bray, a wing out of Kentucky, going to the Cavs at number 49 overall. I do like so far that we've done 3 different players from 2 different mock drafts. We've had 3 different positions because the Cavs, and I do think that you can sort of, anytime a wing is picked, and there are a couple of other wings that we're going to bring up here in a second, anytime a wing is picked, I think you kind of look at it and say, okay, you can just never have too many good guys at this position. And of course, I feel like every guy I talk about, I need to reiterate, like the hit rate on late second round picks is extremely low. It is. I mean, there are not very many guys. And of course, there are guys that do hit, but there are not very many guys selected between 45 and 60 that go on to even be rotation players. Like if the first round, and I think even when you get past 5, it sort of becomes a crapshoot in the draft. And of course, the Cavs have made some good selections in that area. They've made good selections certainly in front of that area. Evan Mobley comes to mind. But the further away you get from number 1, and this, of course, not rocket science, but the further you get away from number 1, the more of a crapshoot it gets. And I think it becomes this way more in the NBA than any other draft. The other guy they had going at number 58 was Dink Pate, a guard, played in the G League with Mexico City Capitanes. He, to me, is a guy I've watched a little bit of. I've not watched all of these guys. I'm familiar with some of them. I've not watched all of them, but I have watched a little bit of G League stuff. And he is, I think, kind of what the second round should be about in this spot. I have no idea if he's going to be good or not. I don't think anybody does. He's a 19-year-old, but he's a crazy athlete. He, to me, is sort of the guy that if you get him in the right type of setting, if you get him in a good developmental system, which I want to talk about that with the Cavs in it coming up in a minute on today's show. But if you get him in that type of system, can you mold this guy into an NBA rotation player? I think there's a chance you can. Doesn't mean it's a lock. It's far from it. Again, mocked at number 58 overall. But I do look at it and say, okay, that is the type of guy that you should be taking a swing on. I thought the pick that they made with Imani Bates, the exact kind of pick that the Cavs should have been making in that spot. Now, Imani hasn't necessarily panned out. I think there's still probably a little bit of time before I'm ready to write him off as an NBA player. That said, I would be not surprised if Imani Bates is not with the Cavs organization next year. I don't know if he will be, but I would not be surprised if he isn't. And I just think that that's the type of guy, though, a high upside guy, and maybe it doesn't pan out. Maybe it never clicks the way that you thought it would. Doesn't mean that they're a bad basketball player. Just means it's really, really difficult to find guys that are NBA rotation players. It's really, really hard to do. Yahoo had Elijah Martin, a wing out of Florida, going to the Cavs at number 49 overall, and Izan Almansa, a big from the Perth Wildcats of the NBL. Of course, that probably sounds familiar because, as we know, Luke Travers played in the NBL. So I think we're a little familiar with NBL teams, but those are the guys that I have seen mocked to the Cavs so far. There are some other guys, too, that are in the range the Cavs are picking. John Tanji, guard out of Wisconsin, thought of as a very good shooter. We'll see what he translates into the NBA. He is somebody that could be somewhere between 49 and 58. And RJ Lewis Jr. from St. John's. I think he's a wing that does a lot of really good stuff. In the limited St. John's action that I watched, which was essentially the NCAA tournament, they really, really struggled to shoot the basketball, and I think he was part of the problem. Like, I think if he were a better jump shooter, that St. John's team probably would have been maybe a little bit more successful in the NCAA tournament. They may have gone a little bit further than they actually did. But just kind of to wrap up this thought before I move on to the assistant coach hire that the Cavs made, drafting at 48 and 59, as I've mentioned, is a crapshoot. The thought when making these picks should be for the Cavs and really any organization. This isn't necessarily a Cavs specific thought so much as it is an NBA developmental thought, just like how teams develop guys. And some teams are certainly better than others. And I think that the Cavs have had some success here. You look at somebody like Dean Wade, who was undrafted, started on a two-way contract. Craig Porter Jr., undrafted, started on a two-way contract. Sam Merrill, a guy that they developed through the G League. Yes, he was the 60th overall pick in the draft by the Milwaukee Bucks a few years ago, but he bounced around, and ultimately the Cavs got him because they selected him with the number 1 overall pick in the G League draft after Sam dealt with some ankle injuries for a couple of years. So I do wonder if that should be the plan. The plan should be, okay, we find a guy that he's going to spend most of this year, if not all of this year, with the Cleveland Charge. He could be on a two-way contract. I think that certainly should be in play. Like I said, I would not be surprised if Monty Bates is elsewhere next season. And that would open up at least one two-way slot. I would certainly expect Naquan Tomlin to be back on his two-way, considering that he is on a 2-year two-way contract. And we'll see about Luke Travers. But I would think that if the Cavs find a guy they like here, they'll be able to open up a two-way slot for one of them. And of course, being the second apron, the Cavs can sign a second-round draft pick using an exception there. That is one of the very few exceptions that they have access to. But these guys should be looked at as maybe they can help out in the future. Maybe they can be the 8th or 9th or 10th guy 2 years from now. If that happens, that is a massive success. If that happens, that would be something worth celebrating. That would be a big deal. That would be a real feather in the cap of the player development staff that the Cavs have. And I do think one of the things that the Cavs do really well is they care about player development. They care that these guys are getting better. And I think it's a very easy misconception to look at and just say player development is only for organizations and teams that are not currently good. When you're good, you shouldn't have to worry about player development. I think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think that no matter where you are at in your team building cycle, and the Cavs are at the point now where they are competing for a championship, no matter where you are at in your team building cycle, this should be a thing where you want to keep getting better, because that is how you remain sustainable. You don't become a sustainable organization. You're not a sustainable roster unless you can develop players. That's why hitting on somebody like a Craig Porter Jr. is a big deal. That's why I think it's pretty important to the Cavs' success, maybe not this year, but maybe 2 years from now, that Jalen Tyson is an NBA quality rotation player. These things are important because you only get so many ways to make moves. You can't really afford to miss on draft picks. And of course, you can afford to miss on number 49 or number 58. It's much different than the 20th overall pick, which Jalen Tyson was last year. But you have to be an organization that is not only majoring in winning basketball games and competing in the playoffs, you have to be an organization that is majoring in player development too. That is something that really does matter. And I think that the Cavs really do have their right foot forward as far as that goes. And they made a hire on Wednesday. Today's Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday. As I record this, it's Wednesday. It's Thursday as you're listening to this. But Wednesday, they made a hire that really fits that bill. We're going to talk about Jawad Williams coming home next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by OLIPOP. OLIPOP, a new kind of soda, a new kind of pop, right? I am somebody who I enjoy pop. I do. I have always enjoyed it. There's sometimes nothing like it, but it also is not something that you look at and say, yeah, this is the best possible thing I could be putting in my body right now. No, typically you're not doing that. Sometimes you're doing that for the taste. Well, with OLIPOP, you can be getting the best of both worlds, because one of the things that I like, aside from the taste, because this vintage cola OLIPOP, it tastes like the vintage cola taste that you are looking for, which is personally my favorite. I got a few flavors sent to me. This is the one that is my favorite. I got the apple one too, which is good, but it's not as good as the vintage cola. But I look at this can, and one of the things I like about it, supports digestive health. That matters to me. I want to try and be a little bit healthier. I think you've probably heard me say this a number of different times. With OLIPOP, I can be getting the taste of that vintage cola that I enjoy so much while also getting the health benefits that I need. So if you want to be like that, you can get a free can of OLIPOP. Just buy any 2 cans in store and they will reimburse you for one of them. Head to drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA to claim your free can and to find OLIPOP near you. Again, that is drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating and leave us a nice review as well. The Cavs were in the news a little bit on Wednesday as they hired Jawad Williams to join Kenny Atkinson's staff as an assistant coach. Of course, Williams did play for the Cleveland Cavaliers during his playing career. He played much more professionally overseas than he did in the NBA. The only NBA experience I believe he had was with the Cavs. He played a little bit in what was at that time the NBA D League as well, and then spent a long time playing professionally overseas. He is a Northeast Ohioan. He played at St. Edward High School in Lakewood, and I do think it's a really cool thing to have a little bit of local flavor on the coaching staff. I know that doesn't actually matter. That doesn't help the team win basketball games, but I do think it's a really cool story to have somebody that went to high school here, that is from here, that is a Northeast Ohioan, that played for the team, be able to come back and be part of the staff. I think that's a really cool thing. And I do think too, I talked a lot in the first segment about player development, but in Williams's previous role, he was on the staff with the Sacramento Kings under Mike Brown, who of course was fired during the season in Sacramento. Makes sense because Jawad Williams played for Mike Brown when he was in Cleveland. But Williams also, in addition to being an assistant coach in Sacramento, he held the director of player development title. And player development is something the Cavs care about. It is something I think every NBA team should care about. So bringing on somebody that has that player development experience, I do think is a really good thing. I think having a former NBA player, even if it is not a player as decorated or as experienced as the guy that I kind of think he's going to slide into the role of DeMarre Carroll, I do still think it's a good thing to have. Anytime that you can have somebody that spent time playing in the NBA on your coaching staff, I think it is a good sign. The Cavs, of course, are not going to be done hiring assistant coaches. I still think that this is a hire that I do think you can look at and say, this is the guy they're bringing on to replace DeMarre Carroll. I don't think that Jawad Williams is necessarily somebody that should be thought of as the replacement for Jordan Ott, but I think this is a good hire. I think the player development stuff matters. And of course, he does not have an extensive resume as a coach, but he played professionally for a very long time. And I think that coming from coaching under Mike Brown, I think is a good thing. I know that it didn't work out for him in Sacramento. I think that probably says a lot more about Sacramento than it says about Mike Brown. But I think that Mike Brown is a good head coach to have some assistant coaching and player development experience under. I don't know what Jawad Williams is going to ultimately be able to bring to this coaching staff. I don't think anybody can truly tell you what he's going to bring until we actually see him get to know him a little bit more. But I do think it's a good thing. Again, the player development stuff is something that when you're looking to fill these behind the bench roles, and that's what I think this is, when you're looking to fill that, having guys that have experience in player development, that have the ability to help guys get better, because if you're not getting better, you're not doing enough. And I look at the guys at the end of the bench for the Cavs that they need to continue to get better, because at some point, whether it's this year, next year, further off into the future, the Cavs are going to need those guys to make significant impacts if they want to be a sustainable organization at a championship level, because you can't be in the second apron forever. As I've said many times on this show, I expect the Cavs to be a second apron team this year. After that, who knows? But I expect them to this year, but they can't be there forever. And because they can't be there forever, they're going to at some point have to cut salary in some way or another. And by doing that, They're going to have to replace that stuff with guys that are cheaper, with guys that are a little bit unproven, with guys that they have developed internally. So making a player development focused hire, I think for the Cavs, could be something that is looked at as a good thing. And I'm very excited to see what Jawad Williams can bring to Kenny Atkinson's staff as a member of it, as an assistant coach. And we'll see if he has a player development title as well. Of course, today is June 19th. We all know what happened on June 19th. We're going to talk about the Cavs beating the Warriors in Game 7 of the 2016 Finals just for a little bit next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, which could be ending tonight. I don't know. We'll see. The intensity, buzzer beaters, fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere that you want to experience live. But there are other things that have that sort of atmosphere. Certainly some baseball games do. Football games do. Maybe not losing your minds, but I think there's a pretty big show that is in town that maybe you want to see while it is in Cleveland. I don't know if you want to go see it. I don't know if I'm going to go see it, but I do know if I do go see it, the way I'm going to get into the door is with Game Time, because Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats for the biggest events. And prices on the app actually drop closer to the start. Plus, killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, and something very important to me, no surprise fees. Game Time is a total game changer. If you're trying to get in the door, whatever event it is, comedy, theater, concerts, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, Game Time has you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So today is June 19th, and June 19th will always be a day that Cleveland Cavaliers fans and Clevelanders really look at and just always will revere, and they should. And I think there is a part of me that thinks that we don't in Cleveland do enough to celebrate that championship, because that's the only one we have for a really, 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 really long time. I'm 31 years old. That is obviously the only one I have seen. And chances are, if you are listening to this show or if you are watching this show on YouTube, just chances are that's the only championship you've seen. Now, there are some of you that maybe are lucky enough to have been around in 1964 when the Browns won a title. I wasn't. But for the most part, most of us have only seen this. And every time this day comes around, I'm sort of reminded about what that felt like. And I'm not at the point now where I'm certainly, I think, more journalist than fan at this point. As somebody that's in the locker room, that's somebody that goes to all these games, that covers them, that has journalistic integrity. I'm not somebody that, like, I don't consider myself to be a diehard Cavs fan, but at one point I certainly was. And this was, I don't know if I would say the peak of it, but this is kind of the moment that I look at, and just that game is one that you're always going to remember where you were. You're always going to remember who you were watching it with. And there are very few moments we get like that, just as sports fans, right? Because there are so many games, and there are certainly games that I could tell you what I was thinking during them or how I felt watching it, but those games aren't super common. And I don't know if there is a game that I could probably tell you more about who I was with or what I felt than Game 7 of 2016, because it didn't feel great for most of it. I mean, watching those Cavs teams play those Warriors teams was, I think, just like from a fan experience, it was terrifying, because you always felt as if the Cavs were, or just watching the Warriors play anybody, because of course, if you were a Cavs fan, then you just did not like the Warriors and you didn't want the Warriors to beat anybody. I think you probably felt this way watching them play the Thunder in the conference finals that year. But you were always watching through like this lens of terror, as if the Warriors were just going to be able to, at any given moment, go on a 9-0 run, and that would be that. It felt as if watching those games, the Cavs were always in this danger zone of the game being over. And it was a terrifying feeling as a fan. And that game certainly had some of that. But watching the Cavs overcome that, particularly at the start of the third quarter with J.R. Smith doing J.R. Smith things, like that is something that I think will always make him beloved in this town, and it should. And watching what LeBron was able to do in that game with a game 7 triple-double after going 41 points in game 5, 41 points in game 6, for my money, I've not seen 3 more incredible, impressive basketball games strung together with that sort of importance on them. Coming back from down 3-1, something that they are the only team in NBA history to do in the NBA Finals, I think is a really cool thing. And I think it is an awesome time to reflect. If you've got a second today, I think today's a really good day, especially with the season potentially just as a whole ending tonight, game 6 between the Pacers and the Thunder in Indiana, where the Thunder can close out that series. If you've got a minute or two today, go back, pull it up on YouTube. When you're done watching this video, if you're watching on YouTube, just go back and watch the final 3 minutes and 39 seconds of game 7 and try and remember what you felt like, because that was it. It felt like you couldn't breathe the whole time. And I remember LeBron was fouled on a 3-pointer, made all 3 free throws, made a 3-pointer, and then Klay Thompson made a layup pretty quickly at the other end with the Steph Curry behind the back pass that went out of bounds happening in between that whole sequence there. But from that point on, nobody scored until Kyrie hit his 3-pointer from the right wing. And it felt like for those 3 minutes and 39 seconds, you couldn't breathe. You didn't feel good. And I don't know how Warriors fans felt, but I can't imagine they felt very good either, because it felt as if I would imagine it felt as if a 73-9 season was just collapsing and stalling out and withering on the vine in front of your eyes. And for Cavs fans, it certainly felt like they're so close to completing this incredible comeback against the greatest regular season team of all time. But it also felt like if one thing goes wrong, it's all going to go away. And obviously it didn't go perfectly for the Cavs because they couldn't score either. But LeBron's block of that Andre Iguodala layup is, to me, the greatest basketball play I've ever seen. Kevin Love being able to stop Steph Curry, and then I believe it was LeBron grabbing a rebound and getting it to Kyrie. Just incredible, incredible moments. If you have a chance today's the day to go back and rewatch that. Today's the day and it's been 9 years at this point. I cannot believe that next year is going to be the 10-year anniversary of the Cavs winning the title. But if you have a chance, go back and watch that game. Go back and watch highlights of that series, because that for me was and will always be the peak of my basketball fandom, my Cavs fandom. And I think it's a really, really cool thing to go back and relive. So if you're watching this, obviously that means you are a Cavs fan. Go back, rewatch it, and go through the rest of your day with a smile on your face, because the Cavs won a title in the greatest way possible. They have, in my opinion, the greatest championship in NBA history. So go back, rewatch that, and go through your Thursday with a smile on your face. And thank you for giving this a listen before you go and watch those highlights that I know you're going to watch now. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And as we get out of here on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe. Hit that notification bell. And I'll be back tomorrow with a mailbag on Locked On Cavs.